All right, good stuff. So what's going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Mi Casa es Su Casa, and I am your host, Niko House, and I have some breaking news for you. But before we get that squared away, got one message for you.
This episode has been brought to you by JustNForm.com. If you're tired of being censored, tired of having your data stolen and sold, go to JustNForm.com, a social media site where all voices are welcome.
All right, had to give a quick shout out for our social media platform, JustNForm.com. Make sure that if you have not, go ahead and register there. We can go ahead and continue the conversation there and on Twitter. The link is in the description below. So, as most of you all know, Tim Canova and Debbie Wasserman-Schultz squared off again after Tim Canova had to leave the Democratic Party because, well, his ballots were destroyed. And he found out his ballots were destroyed in the middle of a lawsuit after they were subpoenaed. The supervisor of election was fined, and that was it. In other words, she committed a federal crime and a state crime, and she merely got fined roughly $200,000. And unfortunately, you knew that came out of the taxpayers' pockets. So Tim Canova had to switch to become an independent. And I'm recapping this story briefly just for people who are just now following this race, since Broward County has now become the center of attention for the entire country. And I'll explain why in a second. But Tim Canova had to leave the Democratic Party because his ballots were destroyed. Once he became an independent, I said that this may be the most telling race in recent history. Now, I say that because there was a lot of debate over whether or not Bernie Sanders or anyone who is a progressive should run in a presidential or even a federal race, or even a state like federal race, like a U.S. House of Representatives or Senate race, as an independent. And I had a feeling, given what had happened to Jill Stein, that may not be a good idea. And one thing that I preach on this network, and anybody who watches this network probably gets tired of me hearing it, I say until we get control of infrastructure and blue precincts, Democrats will control how those ballots are counted, if they are ever counted. In red precincts, Republicans will control what ballots are counted, if they are ever counted. I don't think that there is really any question about that now, considering that we are now hearing about the election for election rigging going on by not only the Democratic Party, but even the Republican Party in states like Georgia. So this was a telling race. It was even more telling because in 2016, Tim Canova got 25,000 votes, give or take a few hundred. In 2018, this week, Tim Canova got roughly 12,000 votes. He had 25,000 votes in a primary with 12,000 votes in the general elections, where he actually got more support because he went independent. I was on the ground. Right? I heard Republicans saying they were voting for Tim Canova. Independents say they were voting for Tim Canova. Democrats who swore that they were literally saying we're voting blue in every other race except for this one because they despise Debbie Wasserman-Schultz. The amount of vulgar language that I heard describing people's feelings of Debbie Wasserman-Schultz was crazy, right? So, briefly, I want to show you this video. For some people may have seen it. Or if you did see it, it was not as good quality, but we revamped it, and it's a shorter version of it to show you what happened. One of the volunteers for the Tim Canova campaign, who shall remain unnamed for safety purposes, caught something that should have had every news station in Broward County as we speak. Take a look.
Sir, officer, are these people coming from other precincts? Is that what's happening? So they let them transport them with one person in the car from other precincts? Apparently so, huh? That doesn't seem right, does it? I know. But you know it doesn't. So apparently Broward County allows people to drive from other precincts by themselves. There's people with just one person in the car here. And they let them just drive over with the ballot.
Now, in summary, what you just witnessed was precincts being driven in, ballots from different precincts being driven in by people who are not accompanied by anybody but themselves, to be dumped into a truck with ballots from the precinct that the volunteer was at. Is that legal? Hell no. I mean, not only is it illegal, but it's completely and totally unethical. But it's also super illegal. Now, this behavior is, it was not only unique to that precinct, because myself and my good friend Suzanne, who was also volunteering on this Tim Canova campaign, saw someone taking ballots from one pile and arbitrarily, at least seemingly so, putting them in another pile that was neatly stacked off to the side. And she did this periodically. And once she realized that that Suzanne and I was watching her do these things, she called her little supervisor over, and she called Brenda Snipes directly, and she didn't say that there was a problem because two volunteers wouldn't leave, because there was actually no reason for us to leave. We weren't breaking any laws. She didn't say that there were two volunteers who were trying to disrupt the the election results, or they were distracting people. What she said was there are two people from Tim Canova's campaign who would not leave, and that she was going to call the cops if we did not leave, despite the fact that we did not break any rules. So this behavior that you saw in that video was non-unique to that precinct. So as you see, it looks like ballots are being transported either to a location or away from a location. But let's be very clear, the bags didn't have like precinct numbers on them. They were being arbitrarily trucked in and thrown somewhere. As you've probably heard in the news at this point, there have been people saying that there have been recounts initiated not only in Rick Scott's race, but also in the gubernatorial race, potentially. But unfortunately, Gillum conceded, but it still is triggering an automatic recount. And a couple of other House races in Florida. Long story short, Broward County messed up potentially the entire election, and we need to look no further than what they did in the Tim Canova elections, and we can just look at the numbers. What you are seeing right now is the election night results. Okay? 58.4%, 154,000 for Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, 12,900 for Tim Canova. As you can see, and I can't iterate this enough, 100% reporting. 100% reporting. The total for that particular count was 251,017. 263,052. The total for Tim Canova and Debbie Wasserman-Schultz race as of right now, according to Florida's official website, 251,517. The official total on election, the day after the election, once again, 264,052. 263,052. The official total, according to Florida's website, right now, 251,517. Now, you might hear a little problem with those numbers. There's a big discrepancy there. Roughly 13,000 votes, just from what we can quantify, like from what we see right in front of us. And I know some people might even say, hey.
Sir. Officer, are these people?
Some people might even say, hey, well, there's a recount going on right now. There are ballots that are still coming in. There are ballots that are still being found. All that would make perfect sense if the numbers were increasing as ballots were being found. What you just heard, ladies and gentlemen, was the total number of ballots counted in the race the day after the election with 100% precinct reporting, 211 precincts, 263,000. Today, 251,000. How the hell did we see ballots magically disappear? It gets better. One of our colleagues actually caught a picture at the board of directors this morning saying that Tim Canova's race recorded 2,615 votes. As in, the original count was 2,900, but they actually dropped by 300. So that's 3 different official totals with 100% precinct reporting. Now, what may be causing this? Oh, and by the way, it gets weirder because if you noticed, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz total on the night of the election, 1,552 votes. Debbie Wasserman-Schultz total today, officially, 148,260 votes. That means across the board, every candidate lost votes. But, of course, as expected, the percentage that Debbie Wasserman-Schultz won by did, in fact, increase. And in fact, her and Tim Canova's race increased. So Tim Canova ended up increasing his margin by 0.1%, and Debbie Wasserman-Schultz increased hers by almost exactly 1%. No, I lied. 0.5%. But proportionally, that's the important thing. Proportionally, their percentage of increase reflect each other. So everyone else lost percentages, even though everybody lost votes. It seems to be that everyone else's percentages are being adjusted according to Tim Canova and Debbie Wasserman-Schultz numbers. This is referring to a tactic that is used with election machines that is referred to as fraction magic. And I want to give you a more astute definition. Give me 1 second. Just want to give you a quick summary. Instead, a fractionalized vote means that instead of 1, the vote is allowed to be half or 1 plus 7/8, or any value that is not a whole number. What does fractionalized votes do, or what can they do? They allow weighting of races, weighting as in WEIGHTING, not like actual weighting. Weighting a race removes the principle of one person, one vote, to allow some votes to be counted as less than one or more votes. But also, it also gives the votes the ability to count as one or more votes. So it could be 1 plus 7/8 or or 1/2 of a vote, depending on which side of the, which end of the fraction magic you're on. So regardless of what the real votes are, candidates receive a set percentage of votes. Regardless of what the real votes are, candidates receive a percentage that is preset of the votes. Now, you obviously, the machines, being machines, would have to divvy up the numbers so that those fractions match or what the votes tally ends up being, at least digitally, no matter what those votes say. Now, and this is something that I told Tim myself, that my bet, by the way, is that Debbie Wasserman-Schultz was not acting out of character this election. For those of you who don't know, she has been. I'll explain in a second. She's not been acting out of character this election if she thought that not only could she rig it, but that it would be effortless and she would have a 100% chance of getting away with it. Why do I say that? Because in the last election, which was obviously like the initiation of her demise, and she should have been beaten, and everybody knew how popular Tim Canova was. He had raised 3.7 million votes. He raised more than any other House candidate, and it was all from individual donations. That man won that election, but she didn't canvass one time. Barely had people phone banking for her. Didn't throw any rallies. In fact, if you all recall, the Florida delegation at the DNC convention booed her. But this time, she was angsty. She was actually harassing Tim Canova's volunteers, not the staff, but the volunteers. She was actually canvassing. She was doing photo ops with Andrew Gillum. Yeah. So what do you think that means? It means that potentially there is a wrench in her plan that she knows could be exposed if someone had the balls to do it. So what would I do in that situation? I don't know. I would probably make it look like my opponent got obliterated because I know I have control of the machines. And if maybe, just maybe, if he gets obliterated by enough, then he will in turn lose his massive support base and be so demoralized by that defeat that he will not challenge for a recount. And even if he wanted a recount, unless there was a legal reason for that recount, he would have to pay way too much money and raise it in a very short amount of time, and therefore it wouldn't really affect us. That's what I would do if I was Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, because she couldn't win it legitimately, right? Now, in order for that plan to work, however, which is why she was sweating, because she knows Tim is not going to allow voices to be stolen and silenced via election rigging and voter suppression. She knows that Tim is going to challenge her. But what she is hoping for is that Tim Canova would not call her bluff. The problem with that logic is Tim Canova has been fighting for 2.5, 3 years now? Almost 4, I want to say. Total, almost 4. You think he's going to stop fighting because you coughed up another fake number that we all predicted would happen? And I'm guessing Debbie Wasserman-Schultz knows that Tim is going to keep putting up a fight. And now, however, which, by the way, my guess is that they're trying to adjust numbers to make them look appropriate because they're under the microscope of the entire country now because they messed up Andrew Gillum's race. They messed up not DeSantis's race, Rick Scott's race against Bill Nelson. And there are a couple of local races as well that were determined by merely hundreds of votes in Broward County that now have to be accounted for. And my guess is that the reason why those numbers are so far off and ballots weren't properly counted, and they're, according to that video, looks like ballots were being hauled off somewhere to never be counted. It probably affected a lot of those races, don't you think? Would you be surprised? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we have seen numbers literally disappear in front of us. And I want to recap this one more time just so you all understand. The grand total, the night of the election, 263,052 votes with 100% precinct reporting, all 211 reported. Now, that's a big deal because the machines reported these votes after the ballots had already been scanned, ladies and gentlemen. So it isn't like these are hand-counted results that are just trickling in. The machines said that there was 100% reporting and all the ballots had been counted. Those same machines also said, as of today, 251,517 votes. There is roughly a 12,000 vote deficit, and it isn't that the votes have increased as more ballots are being found and then totaled in. Actually, the votes have been decreasing as new ballots have been found. And I also want to just make this very clear. And I'm going to explain to you why this is so important. So give me 1 second. I'm going to find this total. I want you all to know something. Broward County has a grand total of roughly 2 million people. It is the second most populated county in Florida. 2 million people. In this race, even if we took the highest, right? 263,000. Even if we took the highest total, the race from 2016 was almost, well, first of all, there were 233 precincts. There is about 30,000, 40,000 more people in 2016 voted and Debbie Wasserman-Schultz won than in this race where they spent millions of dollars to get out the vote. And all of a sudden, there actually was less turnout, despite, once again, what we've seen in all these blue areas, higher registrations. So as registrations are increasing, the population in Fort Lauderdale also, by the way, increasing. The population in Broward County in general, increasing. Registrations increasing, population increasing, candidates galvanizing, like Tim Canova, galvanizing more people. But yet, like we've seen in all these races, that where the establishment person wins, despite all those factors increasing, the number of people coming out are decreasing magically. This is some crazy stuff. So Tim Canova will be providing an update for everybody pretty soon. Definitely watch out for that. Share this video. This is the one-stop shop for all your information regarding the Tim Canova campaign and the election rigging going on in the district for Tim Canova and Debbie Wasserman-Schultz. Broward County is literally determining right now, as we speak, the outcome of not only Andrew Gillum's race, but also Rick Scott's race. And so, understanding that, once again, understanding that we should all right now, I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're a right-leaning independent or left-leaning independent, Green Party, Libertarian Party. This is emblematic of our system and the masses' complicity in this system. Because as long as their player was winning, they didn't want to say anything. As long as their team was winning, they didn't want to say anything. And there have been so many people that I know, when we talked about the realities of election rigging and that Andrew Gillum wouldn't talk about it back then, all he wanted to address was gerrymandering. But he didn't want to talk about election rigging when we were saying it almost feels sometimes as if it doesn't matter if we vote for DeSantis or Gillum, because the outcome will be affected by the outcome will be what the outcome will be based off of what the establishment wants, not based off of our voting. And we said Andrew Gillum won't address this, and he's probably going to suffer for it one way or another. And look what happened. Now, with that being said, Rick Scott also is dealing with election fraud. So once again, election fraud is non-unique to your party. But that also should let you know your party is playing you. Both of your parties. Your parties are silencing your voices. Your parties, especially in this area, but Georgia, you're dealing with it too. California, I mean, every state, I don't give a damn. Any state that still allows machines to total the ballots are dealing with election fraud, period. And if you are only screaming about election fraud when your candidate is being affected by it, then you are part of the problem, because this here shows, in my opinion, very clearly that election fraud is a problem bigger than anything I think that many people who are just now tuning into politics could have imagined. And we need to do something about it now. Thank you all so much for tuning into this very important segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. And always remember, people, more than anything else, find your balance.